And now the overseas news in brief. Last week there was a cholera outbreak among Vietnamese refugees on the Hong Kong island of Tai Chau. And since that time, thousands of refugees are being ferried to another island amid a storm of protest.
The approach of a tropical storm hastened the transfer of refugees to another island. They were moved in old army landing craft to a former leper colony with better facilities than Tai Chau. Meantime, lorry and bus drivers moved in protest convoys backwards and forwards between refugee camps on the mainland. The signs they carried called for the refugees to be sent home.
And on the harbour, there was another protest against the Vietnamese refugees. The Hong Kong Chinese want the Vietnamese to get the same treatment as the Chinese who escaped from mainland China, and that is instant compulsory repatriation. This year alone, 32,000 have come to Hong Kong, most from North Vietnam, and most are not political refugees in the strict sense, but are simply seeking a better life.
On Monday, a passenger flying Continental Airlines tried to open a cabin door while the aircraft was in flight over Fiji. The 39-year-old Englishman was restrained, and on the aircraft's return to Auckland, he was admitted to Kingsley Psychiatric Hospital. Continental say there's no way an aircraft door can be opened in flight because of the air pressure within the plane itself.
Meantime, in the United States, glasnosters arrived in person with the visit of Boris Yeltsin, the leader of the unofficial political opposition in Soviet Union. Yeltsin saw all the usual sights and in an early press conference told Americans the popularity back home of Mikhail Gorbachev is waning and the perestroika needs to show results to the people soon. Yeltsin says the next urgently needed Soviet reform is in electoral laws that will give the people real choice.
And in South Africa, 20,000 marched in a government-approved demonstration to protest at police brutality. Marchers were protesting at the police killing of 23 people, including babies, toddlers, a paraplegic teenager and a pregnant 16-year-old during the lead-up to last week's election. The march was led by Bishop Desmond Tutu, the Reverend Alan Bursack and the Mayor of Cape Town, Mr. Gordon Oliver.
The main focus of our defence strategy is the South Pacific. Regular exercises are conducted in the region in case one day our forces are needed there. This year the Air Force did its tropical training in the Solomon Islands.
An Air Force Hercules winging its way across the Solomon Islands on its way into Guadalcanal. With the Army and Air Force pulling out of Singapore and with Fiji closed off since the coup, New Zealand's paying closer attention to the Solomons and the rest of the Western Pacific. And if the Air Force is sent to somewhere like the Solomons during a real emergency, it helps if they've used the airstrips before, and if the crews know what it takes to operate under radically different conditions. It's hard on the Air Force's fleet of 20-year-old Hercules transports and its equally aged Iroquois. And the Air Force knows that if the frigate deal soaks up most of the defense capital expenditure for the next decade or two, this machinery will get even older and require even more maintenance before it's finally replaced. Running near the equator is hard on the machinery. The heat and humidity mean running at higher revs and using more fuel. 240 gallons for just 3.5 hours flying. Nobody can say exactly how much it costs to put on an exercise like this, although that's about to change in the new cost-conscious atmosphere. But the Air Force points out that a mission like flying immunization teams to remote villages is a substantial chunk of foreign aid that doesn't show up in foreign aid budget figures. The crews fly dozens of flights to take local medical teams to remote villages in the highlands, some of them 4 hours by foot track from the nearest road. Getting medical teams to these villages would take weeks on foot, days with the Air Force, operating in jungle highlands where New Zealand helicopters aren't exactly a familiar sight. The target's an outbreak of yaws, a feared tropic disease making its first appearance since the 60s.
Now, this fella sick, what time name blame now, this fella yaws, yeah? Now yaws send me one fella, big fella sick, yeah? Yaws send me start off with him something yaws him sore, yeah?
The language is pidgin, the vaccine is French. The pain is the same in any language. In the villages up the Monga River, they probably don't know the expression no pain, no gain, but they've just gained immunity from a fiercely contagious disease.
If it's spread, I think it's very bad, because all these villages is here, you can see them that it's not clean. Children are playing together, and so it will spread very quickly.
The teams leave behind sore but immunized Solomon Islanders as they move on up the river. They've also gained valuable flying experiences in places where they've never flown before, and explored the limits of how far they can push their equipment in conditions that are nothing like home. It's been more than a showing the flag exercise, although it does help project New Zealand influence in the Western Pacific. The Air Force isn't scheduled to exercise in the tropics again for another year, but as 3 squadrons shoehorns their Iroquois into the Hercules for the long trip home, they know that with cyclone season on the way, they could be coming back this way on a few hours' notice to fly into a disaster area. And getting ready for that is the object of the exercise.
And now an item on sport. All Black and North Harbour skipper Wayne Shelford has called for a change to the Ranfurly Shield format, which he describes as boring. Shelford wants to see the Shield at stake for every match the holders have, at home or away.
Auckland deservedly has won many friends in smaller unions by taking the Shield to the minor provinces, but Buck Shelford would like to see that policy expanded. The Ranfurly Shield has shifted camp only once since 1982, with the tremendously powerful Canterbury and Auckland unions holding the trophy ever since. Shelford maintains that the Shield, to be of more benefit to New Zealand rugby as a whole, should travel around the unions more.
It's starting to get a little bit boring now. Auckland 4 years down the line, still got the Shield, and you know, it's a real money spinner for them, and it's a money spinner for any union. But I feel that the Shield's there to be moved around the country, and if it was up for grabs every game, I think it wouldn't stay in one place as long as what it does at the moment.
Obviously, Shelford's view is not met with total agreement in Auckland.
I'll be honest about it, I do think the comments smack of a bit of anti-Auckland sentiment, and this has been raised by 1 or 2 other commentators over the past 2 or 3 weeks. We've tried to do it right in the spirit of the Shield by taking it to 5 minor unions now, and here we are still getting criticised.
But Shelford maintains all matches involving the holder should be a challenge.
I'm talking about every game. If they go away for a national championship game and they're playing second division sides or whatever, they put the Shield up for grabs, and I think that would generate the feeling in the areas where they go to as well, and whether it be a first division, second division or third division side.
And finally this week, a story about wetters. Not just any wetters, but a completely new type of creepy crawly.
Meet Jaws. Now, he might look like just any old wetter with rhubars, but Jaws is really special.
Well, it's really the fact that it's a completely new sort of wetter to this country, in fact to the world, I guess. There is one rather like it in Northland, but this is just the biggest and most different of all our wetters.
Jaws, who doesn't even have a scientific name yet, comes from one of the Mercury Islands off the Coromandel Peninsula. Scientists have heard tales of the tusked monster for the last 20 years, but it wasn't until Jaws and a mate were captured and sent to Wellington that they received the recognition they deserved. Only males have the tusks.
Immediately you suspect that if the females don't have them, then it must be something that males do that makes the Jaws useful. It's developed the fighting apparatus almost at the expense of being able to eat.
The scientists and conservationists still have a lot to learn about tusked wetters. But now, after an estimated 100 or so million years, Jaws and others like him can at least, and at last, take their place in New Zealand's extended wetter family.
And that's News Review for this week. Good afternoon.